Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Perligo Ponders, in which I look back at the month we've just ended and respond to your comments, questions, and theories about my own comments, questions, and theories relating to the music and lore of 21 Pilots. As always, if you would like your comment to be featured in one of these videos, simply leave comments down below that are interesting, intriguing, either having a good insight or a fascinating question. Feel free to flag them for Perligo Ponders if you would like, but I don't just pull from comments which are tagged in that way. We have a good number of comments to get through in this episode as well, so without further ado, let's get started. Our first comment comes from Dangerous D Gaming YT, who writes, I just realized how seizing is basically Twisted VR. The movements of the seizer match that of the seized. The antlers equal VR controllers. I think this is a really cool point. I hadn't thought of that before. I'm not sure how much bearing that necessarily has on the lore, but I think it's a good connection to make. Especially as we potentially enter more into a VR world. Although I feel like people have been saying that for a while now, and we haven't really. Obviously exists, and people do engage in that medium, and it's kind of commonplace now that people do, but it's not the norm, and I don't think most people actually partake in VR gaming all that much, or anything like, it's not just limited to gaming. But anyway, that's kind of irrelevant to this point, but I do think it is a good point. It's kind of VR minus the headset. Next, we have a comment from Jackie Morrison, who asks, in Breach, do you think we'll finally see all the bishops in play? We still haven't heard about many of them. Hopefully, that would be very cool if we did. Obviously, Keon's won't be, since he's no longer with us. But, I mean, we did see them all in play in Paladin Straight, or at least we saw 7 of them in play together with Nico absent, and then he appeared. And we see them all kind of working together in Nico and the Niners for the practices of vialism. But I do think it is a fair point that we haven't heard much about most of them. We know about Nico, we know the most about Keon's besides Nico, and then we saw, I think it was Lisden and Scarvenger, I think, in the Skeleton Icy livestream. So that's only really 4. We don't know much about the other 5, and perhaps there is some significance that they'll have. I think they're probably kind of just going to be secondary characters in the end. I don't know if there's enough room in Breach to really learn much about each of them. Again, we know very little about Keon's, and even what we do know kind of spans 2 songs, something like that, 2 videos, at least 2 lore videos. And again, it would be really cool if we did. And I still think it would be really cool if they did go ahead and make that Netflix show of this or whatever, a movie about all the lore. I think it would perform well just from the 21 Pilots audience, at least. But I think it's a cool enough idea that people who are fans of the fantasy genre in general would find it intriguing as well. So perhaps in something like that, we would get to learn more about the bishops. I'm somewhat doubtful that in Breach we'll actually get to see much more about the rest of the bishops, perhaps one of the others. And perhaps we'll learn more about the rest of them collectively, which will lead to not knowing a ton more about each of them individually. Next up, we have a comment from Jack Blanda, who writes, Perligo Ponders, Tyler is the 9th bishop, and he actually does exist in the world of Dima. In Nico and the Niners, there are only 8 bishops walking the streets, a song which happens before Keon's is killed. The red eyes and blurry face now directly relates to the bishops, as well as those new creatures we have found in the contract video, as well as Tyler singing My Name is Blurryface and I Care What You Think and Stressed Out. This brings us back to regional at best, specifically the song Clear. The line goes, I wish I had 2 faces to prove which theory worked. Again, in Goner, I've got 2 faces, Blurry's the one I'm not. And then the Bourbaki group, which has proven to be significant in the lives of both Tyler and Josh. Nicholas Bourbaki wasn't a real person, rather a pseudonym for the group. What if Nico is a pseudonym for Tyler and not a real person? The leader of this mathematical group was Andre Whale, pronounced vile as in vialism. The Bishop Andre is the bishop in Fairly Local, the first song released as a solo before Blurryface came out. In the end, we hear the few, the proud, the emotional, just like at the end of Paladin Straight. The top left circle in the Blurryface album cover is the circle for Fairly Local. It is an eye, and the eye has been a big part of the lead up to the contract. To be concluded, Andre is the main leader trying to get back their last bishop. Tyler, Nico, Blurryface, and Clancy aren't real, rather a figment of Tyler's imagination. This very much ties into and kind of echoes a video that I made over a year ago now, entitled The Truth About Blurryface, or What We Forgot About Blurryface, something like that. And in it, I basically proposed a somewhat similar idea that Andre is the real leader of the bishops for many of the reasons outlined here. It is his circle, which represents the I. He's associated with the song Fairly Local, which began this all, in which we hear feel proud, emotional, and so on. There's a bunch of other reasons why. So I don't think this is far out of the realm of possibility. In fact, I think I referenced it in the Torchbearer video as well that I made, that there's a real possibility he has a much larger role to play in the story than many of us previously had realized. Again, I came up with this idea about a year ago. I did a video on it, and then it's kind of fallen by the wayside because there hasn't been much new evidence to support it. Sort of going along the lines of one of the comments a moment ago, perhaps we'll learn more about Andre in Breach as the story comes to an end. Because again, he is named as a bishop in Dima. He is named with the same name as one of the real life members of the Nicholas Bourbaki group. So there's got to be some greater significance to this particular bishop, even beyond all the others, just simply because of that, or at least some unique significance to him beyond the others. So I won't be surprised if we do learn more about a bishop that it would be this Bishop Andre. And I agree. I think he does have a significant role to play in the story, or at least it's very likely that he does, and it would make a lot of sense if he were to become more of a major character. Next, we have a comment from Colex Buxton, who writes, question, how do the people that live in Dima relate to the cycle? Since it seems that according to the FPE letter, they all have extensive backstories and lives. This is an interesting question. I can't really conjure up more of an answer beyond what we've already seen in the FPE letters. That's how they relate to the cycle. Now, we get some of their backstories and tales of their lives and so on told firsthand through those letters, but we also sort of get an account of how they relate to the cycle. Now, it is a fair point to say, well, okay, if there's this repeating cycle, as I proposed in the Keon's video, of kind of Clancy just going through the cycle again and again, each time becoming a bishop of Dima, how did the citizens see that? How do they understand or interpret that to be happening? One, they could simply be unaware that it's happening. Obviously, part of the theory is that he keeps getting recaptured and held up as a symbol for the citizens and so on. And so, sure, maybe they're sitting there and they keep seeing the same Clancy over and over again. But perhaps that could somewhat tie into the origins of the theory behind the idea that Clancy was more of a byword and a name for this individual who is more of a symbol to the citizens, whereas we in reality know that he's been the same person all the way through. That could be one explanation. Or it could be true that they all kind of exist in the cycle and their backstories don't change from one cycle to the other, and they themselves as characters kind of repeat within the cycle. That may not make much sense now, but hopefully in a later video it will. Next, we have a comment from Make It With Alex, who writes, Perligo Ponders. The same thing could happen with the Banditos taking over Dima. They could become corrupted and power-hungry, then become the version of the bishops, and the cycle repeats that way. Again, in response, I believe, to my video talking about Keon's and how Clancy's cycle has been repeating the way that I believe it has. This is an interesting idea that the Banditos, or a certain offshoot of the Banditos, took control of Dima, overthrew whatever power was already in place, promised a better hope, a better vision of the future through that, became corrupted, became these absolute rulers, these bishops. And perhaps through that corruption, they no longer were able to see yellow, the color of the Banditos, because they had, purposely blinded themselves to what they had sworn to follow in the past, something like that. So that, again, we know very little about who the bishops were before they became bishops, before they took power over Dima. And it seems within Dima, much of the history was erased and silenced and suppressed. So that could be the case. And it could be why they dislike the Banditos so much. Or it could simply be that the Banditos became a movement and originated as a movement after the bishops had already taken power, and very much just in response to the bishops rather than some other power that was already in place. I think a theory like this would work better tying into an idea of the Banditos actually kind of being villains in the story, which is something that some people have proposed. It's not really a theory I fully get behind, but again, if that were the case, something like this could make a lot of sense. Camden Cotton asks, why is RAWFEAR all caps? It's also one word. Yeah, I'm wondering myself. I think I mentioned in one of the videos going over the Breach track list that it's a new stylistic thing, right? We haven't seen this from 21pilots before, that they stylize one of their songs in this way. And it could purely just be a stylistic thing. But again, it's 21pilots. So probably there's some other meaning to it. Some people have discovered it's a pretty clear anagram for warfare. So this song could be about that. Perhaps it's a very interesting and experimental song. You know, they could be doing something with the song itself, the music itself, that ties into the fact that it's an anagram. Perhaps bringing back some of the forward and backwards playing music like we saw in Nico and the Niners, and making a song more like that, which again is very like lore focused, very combat heavy, very rebellious, and has sort of two aspects of it playing in unison or against each other, but still in unison, right? It certainly does seem to be signifying something about the song that is all in caps. It could also be that it's related to the blurry face tweets, which are always in caps. I think that might be somewhat less likely because that's probably a somewhat less obvious connection. I think it's more likely that this is something which will become clear once the album is out and we've either heard the song or seen the music video which accompanies it. Mosin for XM has an interesting point about one of the songs off of Breach. It's not really a question, so I don't know how much of an answer I have to it, but I do think this is an interesting point that he makes here, which is worth highlighting. Perligo ponders. Robot Voices says, the half-drawn blinds casting lines on the floor as my metal friend flashes in time. If the half-drawn blinds are casting lines means that it's morning, and the first time I heard flashing in time I thought it was related to time travel, but what if the metal friend is an alarm clock, which flashes in time for the morning, and the robot voices are the alarm beeping? Could be. I think that would be really cool. And it would sort of tie into Routines in the Night. Perhaps it could be the flip side of Routines in the Night, the sequel to that song, right? Because he is sleeping and then he wakes up at the end of it. Obviously in that, Josh wakes him up, but still, it could be kind of a companion piece to that one. And then also just the idea of, as we've seen again and again throughout this music, of the battle at night ending in the morning. The sun will rise, right, in truce, and so on. The idea of the dawn that we see, the sun rising in Paladin Strait, and so on and so forth, that a lot of this story kind of happens at dusk or towards the dark or at nighttime. Not a lot of the lore videos really happen in the morning or in broad daylight. Paladin Strait is the only one that is happening in the morning, as the story is starting to come to a close. So I think it would make sense to have a song sort of about waking up in the morning and so on. That's very much about what the morning brings, the hope and new life almost that the morning brings after such a night of trials and tribulations. The dark night of the soul. Cygnus024 asks, no second single yet. What are we missing? Again, I sort of addressed this in the last episode in an offhanded manner, but we've only gotten one single so far. It's The Contract. It's going to be track 5. And in that song, Tyler Joseph very clearly tells us, I'm just trying to stay quiet. And then he and Josh proceeded to stay very quiet. And now all of us are sort of wondering why he's not keeping his word this time. Now, that's not to say that I didn't think we were going to be getting more singles myself. I certainly did. I assumed we would be getting one in July, and we didn't. I still kind of think we'll probably get one in August, but maybe not. Maybe it's just going to be the contract and then the album as a whole. I wouldn't necessarily be disappointed if that were the case. I am eager to hear more songs off of the album, but I also do think that in some ways, having heard too many of the songs before an album comes out sort of takes you out of the experience of listening to the entire album for the first time when you keep coming across these songs that you've played a bunch previously. That wasn't as much of an issue with with Clancy, because we had already heard the first 3 tracks off of the album, and then the rest of the album was new. It wasn't kind of sprinkled within. We had heard Overcompensate, Next Semester, and Backslide, and then of course the single version of The Craving, but not the studio version of that song. So I don't think we're missing much. I think we're just kind of forgetting that line from the contract, and that they intentionally chose to have that be the lead single off of Breach and not the first song on the album. Wave Mario asks, if Ned is the representation of Tyler's creativity, perhaps Trash is Josh's creativity, because in the music video for Choker, it is revealed that he got a similar power of the dragon. If that makes sense, or I'm just tripping. Given how you composed that sentence, you may be tripping, Mario. If that makes sense, maybe we'll see him in the Drum Show music video. So it does sort of make sense. I'm a little unclear why Trash and Josh are connected. You did point to the Choker music video, and he does sort of breathe a blue fire, I suppose, in that. I think that's what you're referring to. I'm not convinced that's the real Josh. Choker's been confirmed to not be lore related, but even if it is, I'm not convinced that's the real Josh. I'm not really sure what we're seeing there, but it doesn't seem like it's something that's really happening. Even if that video takes place in the lore, I'm not sure that what we see in that video really happens, and it's not just part of Tyler's imagination or something. It would be really cool to see Trash return in Breach somehow. I'm not sure what that would look like or how that would happen, but it would be very cool if it did. I don't object to that happening in Drum Show. But yeah, if you want to add any kind of clarification or make a better case for this argument, I think it's interesting. I'm just not fully convinced with what you've written here. But if you would like to add more, Wave Mario, feel free to do so, and I'll keep my eyes out for a follow-up on this theme. With that being said, as always, thank you so much for watching. If you would like one of your comments, questions, or theories to be featured in one of the next episodes of Perligo Ponders, simply leave a comment. Feel free to flag it as something for Perligo Ponders if you would like, but I don't just pull from those comments. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more music commentary and reviews.